Got Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. We are lucky enough to get Bo Wulf join the fray with us today. I don't think we've had him on in over a month. How are things in the Wulf Den, Bo?
You know, we're hoping to hibernate soon.
Would be nice.
That's what we would like.
Get a break.
Do wolves hibernate? Probably not, right?
No, they got to move around too much, Bo. Yeah. You know that they're not sharks, but they're doing some stuff. They're athletic.
Yeah, we're predators, baby.
Yes, you are.
Exactly. I guess we'll start with Nicholas Morrow, since that's the most recent signing. So I'll give you
a fancy sounding name, don't you think?
I know, it sounds like a 19th century author playing linebacker for the
Nicholas Morrow.
Yes, exactly. I'll give you a range. Kaiser White or Eric Wilson. Where's Nicholas Morrow gonna end up on that spectrum?
Oh, I mean, I think he's much closer to the Eric Wilson end of the spectrum.
So do I.
That's not good.
Yeah.
But I also think, I mean, we'll see what the contract details are going to be like, but I imagine he's signing close to the veteran minimum.
Yeah.
This is a guy that you sign to have somebody penciled into the role, and you hope that somebody beats him out. I think it's possible they'll sign another veteran linebacker maybe after the draft. They'll see how the draft plays out. It could even be like an undrafted linebacker who they hope beats Nicholas Morrow out. But I mean, I think it's instructive to look at what the Bears did, right? Like aggressively going to sign TJ Edwards to replace Nicholas Morrow, and the Eagles are now on the other side of that transaction. Yeah. I think like two things are true at once, where right now Nicholas Morrow is the best linebacker on the team because we don't know what to expect from Nakobe Dean, but also there's a good chance that he's not on the team in week one. So this is like the business that you do to paper over and Band-Aid positions before the draft, and then you see how things shake out down the line.
All right, so do you think that in 9 months from now, a year from now, Howie Roseman is having a conversation with Sean Desai, and Desai is saying, listen, year two, you went out and really upgraded the defense for Jonathan Gannon. If you're telling me I had to take a step back talent-wise this year, okay, fine. But you're guaranteeing me next year I'm going to be here and you're going to do exactly what you did for me for Jonathan Gannon. Is Sean Desai just going to keep it to himself for the next 12 months and be able to run through the storm of the Eagles taking a step backwards defensively, talent-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I think there were reasons to think that the defense was going to regress no matter what next season, even if they were somehow able to bring everybody back, right? Because they were so healthy. They got some positive turnover luck. Those things tend to regress. And they have a bunch of old guys, right? And so those guys, historically, you would think would take a minor step back year to year. There were so many guys on defense last year who played above what our expectations were for them. And so I think, like, even in a perfect world, you were looking at bouncing back from like a top 5 defense to, a top 15 defense or something like that. Now with, the departures, and we'll see how things shake out. Like, I think this defense is going to be bad or frustrating in the very familiar ways that past Eagles defenses have been, where they're going to be not very good up the middle, right? Like, the linebackers are probably not going to be very good. The safeties are probably going to be mediocre. And we'll see how good the defensive line can be and how good the cornerbacks can be to paper over that stuff. That said, I think it's like a fine strategy for the Eagles, just given where they are in this life cycle. I think their path to like Super Bowl relevance is to have an elite offense. And I think that's what matters more. And as long as they can have a top 3, top 5 offense, they should still be fine.
Does that, a lot of kerfuffle over the recent days, because Bijan Robinson Instagrammed a picture of being in Philadelphia in for a top 30 visit. The Eagles don't take running backs in the first round. We know that, Bo. It's silly to say. I see you smiling. But I agree with you that the way back to the Super Bowl is to be so dominant offensively, you're going to win shootouts, because this defense isn't going to be nearly as good as last season's. And I agree with you. Even if Jonathan Gannon was back, even if they were able to bring back every piece by some magic formula, they were going to regress. They weren't going to be the same defense, at least from a statistical standpoint, whether it's, old school statistics or new age ones, they were going to take a regression. Offensively, they're still really good. And if you add that final piece, and maybe it's Rashad Penny, but Daniel Jeremiah spoke about this. It was like, wow, you just start thinking about Bijan Robinson on that Eagles offense. It's still no chance, right? No chance.
I think no chance at 10, or in the top 20 if they were to trade back or something like that. I don't see that happening. I think I once said like the greatest trick Howie Roseman ever played was convincing people he might take a running back in the first round. He's never going to use a premium pick on that position. That said, I don't think it's insane to think that if, for some reason Bijan Robinson was still on the board at 30 or, in the late 20s, that they might then consider it. For the reasons that you said, that like you can, if you think that he can supercharge your offense, then that could be worth considering. And you're getting more like immediate value out of running backs on their rookie contract. And maybe if you get 5 years of Bijan Robinson, maybe that seems like an appealing thing. I just think in addition to the resource allocation, like first round running backs are usually, it's not a great hit rate. Even Saquon Barkley, right? Like who we were told was a generational talent. He had 2 good years, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not the great bet. It's not the surefire thing that even like a top 10 guard who you would think is not a great bet, but those guys are at least usually good. The running backs are not always that good. And so we've heard this is a deep running back class. I expect that the Eagles are going to draft a running back in the first 3 rounds, probably. I think we will see that happen because I think that's the place that they can add an immediate contributor. But I think in the first round, I still would be surprised if Howie Roseman pulls the trigger.
All right, let me follow up on something you said, mostly defense-oriented, but if it's an offensive player, please say so. We all acknowledge Father Time is undefeated. Ask Tom Brady. Or maybe not. Maybe he comes back again. Anyway, everybody gets older, and so at some point you're playing day end. So Father Time does always win. Sometimes he comes up and just hip checks you to the side. You got to take a step back. And other times he comes up and just pushes you dead in the back and face plants you into the turf. I think we drop. We'll wait until he gets reconnected. So let me run it by you, Johnny Mac. Somebody from the Philadelphia Eagles this year is going to get beat by Father Time and get beat bad. And just there's going to be this massive drop off of the production. And it doesn't matter what the Eagles are paying him or decided to pay him again because they re-signed him. Bo, hopefully you heard most of the question. If you had to pick one Eagle that you said Father Time is just going to crush this year, that he's just not going to be the player he once was, this one's going to pan out badly this year. Who do you think the Eagle right now on their roster that they're counting on is going to be a guy who loses out badly to Father Time this year?
It's a good question. I think I would lean towards one of the corners because, Brandon Graham's not going to get 10 plus sacks again, but he's in a very specific rotational role, right? They're not counting on him to be a dominant pass rusher. Fletcher Cox maybe is not quite the same player that he was, but he too is going to be in a rotation. You're going to limit his snaps to some degree. I think there's a real possibility that one of James Bradberry or Darius Slay takes a significant step back. These are, the history of corners at that age is not great. Darius Slay is going to be 32 this season. There was only one starting corner in the league last year who was 32. That was Patrick Peterson. I think there's a real chance that one of those two guys takes a step back. And that's why, as much as it's nice that they have filled those positions short term, in the draft, cornerback remains one of the most pressing needs that they have because they have nobody long term that they can definitely count on. Maybe you love Zach McPherson, maybe you have really high hopes for Greedy Williams, but I don't think that those are good bets necessarily.
To kind of expand on that, Bo, the theme as a whole and how we has talked about in the past in 2017, 2018, sort of learning from whether it's loyalty or whatever you want to call it, but they brought back a lot of aging players, and you had a lot of choices to answer that question. Is that a sensible way to do things? And was Howie just paying lip service? Because he showed a lot of loyalty to these guys, familiar names.
Yeah, I mean, the 5 most expensive deals they've given out are to guys who are, I think, 30, 32, 33, 33, 35, 35, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, I don't think that's a good way to do business. I think you can take each of those decisions individually and say that they were probably the right decision if you look at them in a vacuum. Like, you're not going to tell Jason Kelce he's not welcome back, right? You know, he's still an elite player. Brandon Graham takes a very team-friendly deal and is a rotational player. That makes sense. Fletcher Cox, once you lose Javon Hargrave, you need to replace those snaps somehow. He was probably the best option available. Darius Slay and James Bradberry, you know, did you need to bring back both of them? Maybe not, but in lieu of definitely having a safety in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, if you figured that was not going to happen, then maybe those made sense. But in general, I agree with you that this does seem like, to some degree, it's going down the path of post-2017 when you tried to hang on to the core a little bit too long. I think, as I said before, I think the state of the secondary is probably what would worry me a little bit more than anywhere else in terms of the age. Like Darius Slay and James Bradberry were both really, really awesome last year. I think there's an expectation that they should both take some kind of a step back this year.
That's Bo Wulf here with us on Birds 365. All right, Bo. The Eagles have their work cut out for them in several positions because they knew they were going to lose a bunch of guys. It was just a given. They had so many guys in free agency. We haven't had Jan since the free agency period started. I want to get your take on the very open stance that Howie Roseman took when he got out to Indianapolis today. We knew we were going to lose free agent. We're going to be getting compensatory draft picks because we've got so many guys that are going to free agency. And that was a choice for us to move away from our usual way of doing business. That the Eagles have always been a team that have tried to identify guys, get a contract extension done, not even let them get their foot into the door of free agency. They didn't do any of that this year. And they said, at least for Howie, they did so because they didn't want to mess with locker room chemistry and mojo. They saw the possibilities with the undefeated start that, hey, this could be a special year. Let's not screw this up by picking one or two and negotiating with them and ticking off the guys that we don't try and extend. Was that a winning strategy by Howie Roseman, if he's being truthful with us?
Well, I mean, I think he would say that it helped to some degree get them to the Super Bowl, and you didn't want to mess with chemistry on the road to a team that had, potentially Super Bowl championship like heights. And I think that's fair because I do think that if you had, say, extended Marcus Epps midseason because, you could get him on a team-friendly deal, how is CJ Gardner-Johnson going to take that? Probably not super well, right? If you wanted to,
that's a guarantee,
right? If you
certainly
CJ, and vice versa, right? Like how does Marcus Epps feel if he's been, this good soldier the whole, his whole time in Philadelphia, and you're extending the guy that you just traded from who wasn't here before? How's he going to feel about that? You could say the same thing about linebacker. If you wanted to lock in a good price for TJ Edwards or Kaiser White, how's the other guy going to feel? And even if it's Javon Hargrave, how's Fletcher Cox going to feel? There were so many of the guys who were hitting the market had like guys in the same position group who were in a similar situation. And so I think that was a real consideration for them. And I don't know, looking back, like who they definitely would have done a deal with if it were a different type of season. Marcus Epps is the guy who like sort of struck me as the kind of guy the Eagles would extend normally because it's like they're rewarding the guys who came up. But I don't know that like we would feel so differently about the future of the Eagles if Marcus Epps was under contract for 2 years and $4 million or something like that. I think it worked out okay because they had to make all these decisions anyway, and there wasn't going to be a ton of cap space to begin with. But it is notable because it was a different way of doing business for them. Yeah.
And I think the part he left out was he didn't have a ton of leverage. Typically, if you're a 9-8 team, you can get these deals done. As you mentioned, Bo, everybody's having a career year. I mean, that's not when you necessarily want to.
Well, and usually they would do it in like September or October, right? Before those guys have
Well,
started to
late.
necessarily
Dallas
play
was
well.
a little bit later.
That's
If
right.
you look at that year, so but when you're that good and guys are performing at that level, it becomes a lot more difficult to get those team friendly deals. And let's be honest, that's what the Eagles want. That's
Sure,
why
and the
they had
longer
Kirk.
you go into the season,
Yeah.
the closer you are to free agency.
Yeah. We got to talk about CJ. I mean, it seems like everybody outside, and it's not just the Eagles, but a lot of people do a tremendous job. Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus, does a tremendous job. Spotrax, I think, a little bit more hit and miss. But everybody who does these valuations, Bo, outside the NFL, they got CJ Gardner-Johnson way wrong. And it's not just the Eagles, because there's 31 other teams.
Yep.
What did we all miss here? What is your take on how things unfolded with CJ Gardner-Johnson?
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's hard to know, from the outside, but there's two things. One is that the safety market as a group has been much lower cost than expected.
Well, but Bates got paid at the top.
Aside from Jesse Bates,
you got to
right?
acknowledge that.
The middle class of the safeties has been much cheaper, and I think that most people considered CJ Gardner-Johnson as like the 1B to the Jesse Bates 1A, and it turns out that he was valued as more of part of that middle class. I think he valued himself that way, and I think his agents didn't do him any favors. I don't think they read the market correctly. But I mean, there are obviously some concerns from teams about like how CJ Gardner-Johnson is going to handle getting paid. There's that Roman Harper clip that went around. I think it's probably instructive that two teams that have had him over the past year have wanted to extend him, like wanted to keep him in the building. And then once that process began, decided, okay, you know what, maybe we're better off just letting you go. I don't know what the reason for that is. We know that he's a temperamental guy, but at the same time, Nick Sirianni has talked about how much he loves that energy. Like he brings, it's often like described as that antagonistic energy in games, but I also think that there's an energy that Sirianni likes that like adds a competitiveness to practice that might not otherwise be there. And so I think the Eagles like that and wanted that, but at some point it became too much of a headache, it seems like.
All right, the other big move they made in the secondary was playing the game with Darius Slay. He's going to be released. He is released. Oh, he's not released. Oh, they've worked out a contract extension with him. A lot of ups and downs and negotiations behind closed doors that we don't know all the details to. But they did get him done, and that probably did affect the CJ Gardner-Johnson negotiation. D. Slay is another guy who's not afraid to speak his mind. He's not afraid to take to social media. You think he's a happy guy right now? Or do you think he kind of took the best of bad deals?
Well, first of all, he's always a happy guy. He could have been like kicked out of the league and he'd still be a happy guy. Okay. But I think it worked out well for him. I think he preferred to be in Philadelphia, and he did end up getting more money than he would have if he had just simply agreed to the restructure. So it worked out very well for him. I don't know if Howie Roseman's happy about how it turned out. He did call their bluff to some degree, but he didn't make out better than he would have if Slay had just agreed to the restructure. Now, extending him did allow them to open up some cap space, so it was necessary for that.
And wouldn't you not make that the most important aspect of it? They couldn't keep him if it was final year of the deal and he just put his foot down and said, hey, either release me or pay me what you're due to pay me. The Eagles would have released him. They weren't keeping him at the cap number he was at.
Correct. And so that's why it made sense to then pay him a little bit of extra money in order to open up the cap space. But I don't think that worked out necessarily well in the Eagles' favor. And I don't know that it goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier. Like, I don't know that it's a great business to have two starting corners over 30.
Do you think it was down to they were going to keep two of the three in the secondary, and it kind of manipulated? Because I kind of got the feeling, well, originally it was probably going to be Slay, rework a deal with Slay, get CJ back, and Bradberry, I think we all thought was just going to get more money.
Right.
Then it came Bradberry was willing to take a little bit less. All of a sudden, you get Bradberry back. Then it seemed it was going to be Bradberry and CJ, and Slay was out the door. And then all of a sudden, the 180. Do you think it came down? They were keeping two, and when things worked out with Slay, the door was shut on CJ.
It seems that way, but I also think that they're probably, they really are pretty close up against the cap right now. Yeah. But I think that if there was a real willingness and hope to bring CJ Gardner-Johnson back, I think they could have found a way to fit him in as the third if they wanted him.
All right, Bo, if we call it a luxury, I've used that term, John's used that term, so I'm going to use it with you here. Which was a more necessary luxury? Adding a guy like Marcus Mariota who can, like Jalen Hurts, run RPOs, make plays with his legs, not have to change the playbook when you have to go to your backup quarterback in case of injury, or Zach Pascal is one of the best blocking wide receivers in the National Football League. If they're both considered luxuries, which one do you think was more important? We know the Eagles have landed one out of two, lost one of the other. Do you think if they were choosing their luxuries, they chose the right one?
Yeah, I think so. And I think like the price tells you what matters more. I think it's much easier to find a blocking wide receiver who can play on special teams than it is to find a really good number two quarterback. Now, we could debate whether Mariota is a really good number two quarterback, but he's certainly being paid like that. And I think that there's some added value to him being able to keep some of the playbook like you talked about and not change the offense. That said, the Eagles put up 30 points on the Cowboys with Gardner Minshew, and he's a kind of quarterback, right?
I always thought, Bo, that they enjoyed it, not that they wanted. Like backup quarterback's so interesting because you and the Eagles value it more than most teams. But at the end of the day, you sit back when you have a good quarterback and you pray you don't have to play the
never
guy.
Gets on the field.
Never gets on the field, whether it's Marcus Mariota, Gardner Minshew. But I did get the feeling that, Nick was sort of energized when Gardner got to play because they had to do.
It's a different problem to solve. Yeah, it's kind of fun.
And I think the Mariota is good on zone reads and RPOs. You don't have to change as much, but he's going to run the same offense, but more crappily than Jalen Hurts. So I'm not sure how much that part of it factors in. As you mentioned, Gardner started 4 games. He was great against the Jets, and Jody will know, just the Jets. The second game, week 18, didn't matter. Then he was really good against Dallas, a couple big mistakes, and then he was terrible against New Orleans. Overall, pretty good backup, I think.
That's fine.
And I think he was looking for an opportunity. He's got a better opportunity in Indianapolis because at least he can be a bridge quarterback for 2 weeks or whatever it ends up being. On the surface, it looks like, Mariota's much better. Is he, though? I don't know about that one.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think the Eagles probably were interested to some degree in bringing Minshew back. But I think once he left, you saw that Minshew signed first and then the Eagles signed Mariota, right? So it could have been that they were hoping for Minshew. I think it's fine. I think, we know how much they value the position. And to be fair, Jalen Hurts has gotten hurt each of the past 2 seasons. In both of his full seasons as a starter, he hasn't made it through all 17 games. So it's an important thing for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And we know that the best path, as we just saw, to get into the Super Bowl is getting the 1 seed. And so every game in the regular season matters. And the margins between Marcus Mariota and, call it, I don't know, like Colt McCoy or whoever are significant enough to matter.
I'm not sure about this. Please correct me, guys. I think they signed Mariota before Minshew signed with the Colts. It might have been the same exact day, but at least that's per the announcement. I think Mariota was in the Eagles' fold before Minshew ever went to the Colts. I may be wrong on that. I apologize if I am, but I think the Eagles actually made a choice and chose Mariota over Minshew.
Well, even if that is true, they may have heard from Mariota that he was, or from Minshew that he was not interested in coming back.
True. All right, that's true too. All right, you need the crystal ball out of your, Bo. Look into it now. Eagles 2023 season. the individual who will get the most carrying the football for the Philadelphia Eagles is who?
Rookie who I don't know yet. It's
Yeah,
be their second or third round pick, I would say.
TBD. I agree with you.
Someone who is not on the roster at the moment.
Yeah. So I'll leave it there at Bo_Wulf. Last one for me. Follow Bo on Twitter, theathletic.com/Billy. Read them there. It's been a theme. I mean, there's a couple themes with the guys the Eagles have brought in. One, they don't want to ruin the compensatory picks coming up in 2024. Rashad Penny, Justin Evans, our buddy Nicholas Morrow, the 19th century author, even Greedy Williams. Injuries, and maybe pick across the Walmart clearance aisle. Maybe one hits. If one hits, who's the most important? Rashad Penny?
Of all these guys that they've signed. I mean, I guess I would say Morrow because I think he's the one who's actually going to play. I mean, Rashad Penny, like when he's healthy, he's awesome, but they gave him less guaranteed money than they gave Boston Scott. I think that tells you like what their expectations are for Rashad Penny. I think there's probably a better chance that we see Morrow, like more of Morrow than we see more of Penny. And so I guess I would say Morrow, but I think the real likelihood is that probably none of these guys are going to be major factors in the 2023 Eagles season.
All right, and I brought this up to the guests we've gotten on since Isaac Seumalo signed elsewhere and went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't want to do it, but I feel I need to. Are we just putting too much faith in Jeff Stoutland as the guru of all offensive line coaches that he can wave his magic wand and a center becomes a right guard because he says so? That they're just going to plug Cam Jurgens into right tackle and you're not going to miss a beat from Pro Bowl level play from Isaac Seumalo. We have so much faith in Stoutland and it's pretty much earned. Do we just take it for granted? Oh, well, if Stoutland says he can be a right guard, then he'll be a right guard. Are we over projecting what Cam Jurgens is going to be asked to do and then be capable of doing, replacing a guy like Isaac Seumalo?
I don't think so. And I love Isaac Seumalo as a player. I think he was, very underrated and an important part of that season. But I mean, if there's anywhere in the NFL where you should be able to like mold a guy and expect solid results, it's between Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson, right? Mm-hmm. And I think like the team is internally very high on Cam Jurgens. Like I don't think the like relative size difference between center and guard is going to matter much to Cam Jurgens. He's not a tiny guy, and he's got long arms. I know he didn't play the position in college mostly, but that's because he was such a good center. I think he will be fine there.
Bo, great stuff. Good to catch up with you again. Hadn't had you on in a while. We will try and put the request out earlier next time, certainly before the draft. We're going to want to get you back on, which is about 5 weeks down the road. Thanks for jumping in with us today. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bo.
Wulf from The Athletic. If you're not an Athletic subscriber, he's worth it just on his own. Does such a good job covering the Eagles and whenever he jumps in with the Mac and Mac guys. All right, coming back. We got to put a bow on this show. Got about 10 minutes left. Stay here with us on Birds 365.